"That dog just climbed out of a tornado pile like he was late for work," I shouted, stumbling over bricks and bent siding to get a closer look. We were barely catching our breath after the twister, still blinking dust out of our eyes, when this mud-caked golden retriever came limping over a mangled fence like he'd done it 100 times. The storm had roared through our corner of Oklahoma just before sundown, and in less than 10 minutes, it ripped trees from their roots, flipped 2 trucks in the feed store lot, and peeled half the roof off my brother Caleb's place. I'd been helping him patch that roof just hours before. Now it was scattered across 3 properties and wrapped around a power pole. My pickup looked like a crushed soda can, but somehow I was still standing. And so was this dog. He came straight to me like I owed him money, tongue out, tail flicking with cautious hope. I knelt beside him, brushing debris off his back. He didn't growl, didn't flinch, just looked up at me like we were supposed to understand each other. "Where'd you come from, buddy?" He didn't answer, of course, but he did something better. He turned around and started trotting down the road. Slow, limping a bit. Then he stopped, turned his head like, "Well, you comin'?" I looked at Caleb, who was bleeding from the brow but breathing. He gave me a nod. "Go, I'll get the others checked." The road was half gone, trees stripped bare, siding and insulation scattered like confetti. But the dog, we later called him Murphy, never once looked unsure of where he was going. He led me past broken fences and smoking barns, past neighbors calling out names and sifting through wreckage. We walked nearly half a mile before he cut into a field and paused at a toppled tree. He let out a bark, sharp and short. I hurried over, thinking he'd found a body. My stomach twisted. But when I got closer, I heard something. A whimper. Small. Soft. Under the base of that tree, sheltered by the roots and mud, was a little girl, maybe 6, her hair matted with leaves, arms clutching a pink backpack, eyes wide, locked on the dog. "Hey there," I said, crouching slowly. "You hurt, sweetheart?" She didn't speak, just clung tighter to her bag. Murphy whined. She reached out and buried her fingers in his fur. That's when she finally looked at me. "He came back," she whispered. "He came back." I carried her out. She wasn't injured, just scared and chilled. The wind was picking up again, rain threatening to return. We got back to the road where a rescue truck was inching through the debris. I waved them down. Murphy stayed pressed to the girl's side until the EMTs coaxed her into a blanket and took her for a check. Turns out her name was Lily. Her family's trailer had been flattened, and somehow she'd gotten tossed or blown, or maybe crawled all the way to that tree. They'd been looking for her ever since. And Murphy? He belonged to her grandparents. Hadn't been seen since the storm hit. No collar, no tag. Just instinct and something like duty. When her mom arrived, sobbing and shaking, she dropped to her knees and hugged the dog first. "You saved my baby," she said into his fur. Murphy didn't bark, didn't wag, just sat there, accepting the hug like he knew exactly what he'd done. Over the next few days, the story spread. Folks from neighboring counties came to help with cleanup. Murphy got his own spot on the local news. Someone even started a fundraiser for pet rescue. Caleb's roof was toast, but his spirits weren't. He joked about putting up a statue of Murphy out front. I ended up taking the dog in, at least for a little while. Lily's grandparents couldn't be found. Her mom said Murphy might have wandered off after one too many fireworks during the 4th and ended up miles away, He was skinny, had an old limp, one ear folded funny, but he was loyal to a fault. We set up a cot for him in the mud room. He slept like a rock the first night. The second night, though, he started barking at the back door around midnight. I figured it was a raccoon, but when I stepped outside, flashlight in hand, he trotted out and down the driveway. Again, he turned back, eyes on me. Waiting. "Where to now, Murph?" I asked. He didn't bark, just started walking. And somehow I knew. This wasn't over, not even close. By the time we hit the tree line, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was leading me toward something again. Not just a walk, not just a hunch. Something was out there. Something that would change everything. And Murphy already knew. "You sure this ain't just a long walk to a squirrel?" I muttered, stepping carefully over a soggy log as Murphy kept his nose low to the ground. The flashlight beam flickered every few seconds, the batteries threatening mutiny. I hadn't planned on a midnight hike, but there I was, boots heavy with mud, following a shaggy retriever with a limp and a sense of purpose more confident than mine. We moved past the old Becker property, now just a shell of singed wood and upturned earth. That place had been empty for years, and now the tornado had finished what time started. Murphy paused near the wellhead, sniffed, then turned sharply left. Straight into the woods. "Murph, come on, buddy. It's dark. And I'm not exactly wilderness trained," I whispered, hoping my voice wouldn't carry. But he didn't even turn, just pushed through the brush like it was broad daylight. Branches scratched my arms and I tripped twice over hidden roots, but the dog didn't stop. When he finally did, it was in front of a collapsed hunting blind. The kind made of faded plywood and tarps, tucked between two thick oaks. He barked once, sharp, then again, louder. I swept the light across the blind. At first, nothing. Then, movement, a flicker. I stepped closer. "Hello? Anyone out here?" A rustling, a cough, then a voice, thin as a reed. "Help!" I dropped to my knees and pulled back the flap of tarp. There, barely visible under a layer of old leaves and tarp scraps, was a man. Maybe early 50s. Face pale, beard full of twigs. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Hey, it's okay. I've got you," I said, fumbling for my phone. No bars. Of course. Murphy stayed close, lying down beside the man, resting his head near the guy's shoulder. "What's your name?" I asked, removing my jacket to cover him. "Dale," he rasped. "I couldn't walk out. Leg's bad. Been here since yesterday." I did a quick look and saw the swelling. His ankle looked like a balloon under soaked denim. "Hang tight, Dale. I'll go get help. Murphy here will stay with you." He grabbed my sleeve. "Don't leave him. He's the reason I didn't lose my mind. Found me last night. Stayed right here." I stared at the dog. He'd already done more in 2 days than some people did their whole lives. "All right," I said. "Then we both go get help." It took 20 minutes to get back to the road, then another 10 to find a signal. The volunteer fire station sent a 4-wheeler with 2 EMTs who had to cut through the woods with stretchers. Murphy led them back like a seasoned search and rescue veteran. Dale was dehydrated but alive. Turned out he'd come to town to visit his sister and went for a hike when the storm hit. He tried to take shelter and ended up trapped. "You're lucky," the EMT said, strapping him in. "Without the dog, you wouldn't have made another night." I didn't argue. Word spread fast, again. Murphy got a second news segment, this time with a title, "Miracle Dog Saves 2." Kids made drawings. Someone mailed him a collar with a tag that read, "Hero." I put it on him, and he didn't protest. He just licked my hand and settled onto the porch like he owned it. He'd been with me a week when Lily and her mom came to visit. She ran straight to Murphy, hugging him so tight his eyes watered. "He remembers you," I said. "He's the best dog ever," Lily declared, her arms still around him. Her mom smiled, tired but grateful. "You've done a lot for us. For this town, really." "Wasn't me, it's him." Murphy wagged once and rolled onto his back, like the hero role was just a fun side job. Later that day, I noticed Murphy pawing at the floor near the mudroom. Thought maybe he'd stashed a bone. But it was more than that. He dug lightly, sniffing, backing up, then pacing. That night it rained hard. Thunder boomed through the house. I kept the windows closed tight, but Murphy stayed alert, staring out the front door. The next morning, the river had risen. Not dangerously, but enough that the ground was soaked and the lower trails flooded. Still, Murphy wanted to go out. I followed him again, raincoat zipped, boots snug. He led me south this time, past the cornfield ruins and along the creek's swollen edge. We reached an abandoned mobile home, partly buried under a fallen tree. Murphy stopped, ears perked. "You can't possibly think," I started. But then I heard it. Crying, a baby's cry. I ran. Inside the shattered shell of the trailer, wedged between a mattress and a shattered cabinet, was a baby in a car seat, soaked, red-faced, screaming. My hands shook as I pulled debris away. Murphy barked behind me, alerting the sky if he had to. The baby was cold, but breathing. I wrapped her in my shirt, ran back to the house, and called 911. An hour later, the child was in an ambulance. The police found her parents nearby. Both had been knocked unconscious in the storm. They'd assumed the baby was lost. When I showed them Murphy, the father dropped to his knees. "He brought her back to us," he whispered. Murphy sat quietly, watching. 3 lives in under 2 weeks. I looked at him that night and said, "You know something we don't, huh?" He stretched out on the porch, tail thumping. The local paper called him the miracle dog of Mayfield, but I couldn't help thinking. He was still looking for something. Every night, he'd sit facing the woods, waiting. Something else was coming. And Murphy? Murphy would be ready. "Murphy, are you waiting for another apocalypse?" I asked, peeking through the screen door at him. It had been 2 weeks since the baby rescue, and Murphy still spent every evening sitting stiffly at the edge of the porch, facing the woods. Rain or shine, wind or calm, he stayed rooted in that spot for at least an hour. His eyes didn't blink much, and his tail didn't wag. I didn't want to spook him, but I couldn't ignore the unease building in my gut. Not fear, exactly, just something off-kilter, like when you walk into a room and know something's been moved but can't figure out what. Murphy turned his head a little and looked at me. Not a stare, more of a nod, then back to the woods. I stepped outside and sat beside him. "All right then, let's see what you see." The sun had long since dipped below the treetops, leaving us with just the purples and deep reds of a fading sky. The cicadas were in full swing, and somewhere a generator hummed, a reminder that the town was still catching up from the blackout. Then it happened. A sound. Far off, metallic. Not thunder, not wind. Murphy stood up. He barked once, low and quick. He was on the move again. Okay, I'm coming," I said, grabbing a flashlight. We cut across the neighbor's field, which had become more of a swamp than anything else. My boots sank with every step. Murphy didn't even flinch. He moved like he knew every blade of grass and every dip in the ground. About 15 minutes in, we reached a section of woods I hadn't walked since I was a kid. It used to be someone's property, a guy named Ronnie who built weird shacks in the trees and lived off the grid until the early 2000s. When he passed, the land was left to the wild. Murphy stopped by a low mound of stones, nose twitching. Then he growled. That was new. I crouched beside him and shone my light. At first I didn't see anything. Then I noticed the glint of something man-made under the vines. Metal, a handle. We pulled back the brush to reveal a rusted cellar door. "Is this what you were waiting on?" I asked. Murphy barked again. I yanked the door open. The hinges screamed. A musty gust of air hit me like a punch. Inside, the stairs descended into darkness. My brain screamed no. But Murphy took a step forward. So down we went. The cellar was bigger than I remembered. A series of rooms once used to store canned goods, and Ronnie's strange collection of survival gear. Now it looked like someone had been here recently. Bags, bottles, blankets. And then, footsteps. I froze. "Hello?" I called. "We're not here to cause trouble." Silence. Then a whisper. "Please don't tell anyone." A boy, maybe 13. Skinny, pale, eyes wide with fear. Murphy walked straight to him and sat down. I slowly approached. "You all right, kid?" He hesitated. "I've been hiding here. Since the tornado. I didn't want to go to foster care. My dad's, he didn't make it." My heart dropped. "What's your name?" "Eli." I sat on a nearby crate. "Eli, nobody's going to take you unless we make sure you're safe. Let's get you some food and checked out, all right?" He didn't move. Murphy nudged his hand. "I knew someone would come," Eli whispered. "I saw him outside one night. He kept coming back. I knew he was trying to help." Murphy had known. He'd been waiting for Eli to trust him. Back at my place, we got Eli cleaned up. He ate 4 sandwiches and fell asleep on the couch with Murphy curled at his feet. The next morning, I called the sheriff. We handled it gently. The town rallied around him like they had for Lily. A family down the road, a retired couple, offered to take him in temporarily. He agreed. "You think he'll be okay?" I asked Murphy that night. He yawned. But something told me he wasn't done. He still watched those woods every evening. He still waited. 3 rescues. 3 lives. And Murphy? He was still on duty. Murphy stood at the edge of the porch again, but this time, something was different. The way his ears tilted forward, the way his body leaned, not like a dog watching for a squirrel or listening for wind. He was braced, like he knew something was coming. Not in a few minutes, not tomorrow, now. I stepped out with a steaming mug of coffee and followed his gaze toward the field that bordered the backwoods. Nothing moved. The morning haze was just lifting, and the trees were silhouetted against a sky that couldn't decide if it wanted to storm or shine. Murphy took 1 step off the porch. "Where to this time?" I asked him. He trotted ahead. No barking, no looking back. I followed. By now I didn't question him. Not after Lily, Dale, and Eli. Not after the way he seemed to just know. I laced up my boots tighter and grabbed the first aid kit, just in case. We passed the Becker ruins again. A small wooden cross had been put up out front with sunflowers tied to it. Murphy slowed there for a moment, sniffed the air, and moved on. It was almost reverent, like he paid respect in his own quiet way. We walked along the creek bed, which was lower now after a week of dry skies. Frogs scattered as we crossed. Murphy led me to a spot just beyond the bend, where the trees grew tighter and the shadows felt colder. He stopped beside a pile of twisted wire and broken boards. From a distance, it looked like part of a chicken coop or shed, crushed and forgotten. Then I saw the shape. A man. Not moving. Face down. Murphy growled, not at the man, but the air around him. Low and steady. I rushed forward, heart hammering. The man groaned. Alive. I turned him over slowly, mid-30s, bruised. Blood dried around his mouth. His eyes fluttered. "You okay?" I asked. "Can you hear me?" He mumbled something. I pulled out a water bottle and trickled a bit into his mouth. He coughed, then swallowed. "Truck," he said hoarsely. I crashed. The storm. There was no truck nearby. I scanned the area but saw no wreckage. "Murphy," I said, pointing toward the woods. "Find it." He bolted. I wrapped the man in my jacket and propped his head up. A few minutes later, I heard barking. I followed the sound and found the vehicle 100 yards deeper in the trees. A rusted blue pickup, flipped on its side and covered in moss and broken branches. The man had been thrown or crawled out. I called emergency services. They were out in 20 minutes with a stretcher. Murphy stayed beside the man the whole time. His name was Rick. He'd been missing for a month. Folks thought he'd skipped town. Nobody knew his truck had gone off the old hunting trail and into the woods. His sister cried when she saw him. "We thought you were gone. How did you know?" she asked me. I just pointed to Murphy. Back at home, I sat on the porch watching Murphy nap beside the geraniums. He didn't look tired. He looked content. But that evening, just like before, he was back to his spot. Eyes fixed forward. Not done yet. That night I dreamed about him. Not like normal dreams. This one felt strange, vivid. I was standing in a field, sky orange and gold, and Murphy stood at a distance, barking at the horizon. Then he turned to me and ran. Behind him, something shimmered, a shape I couldn't quite define. I woke up sweating. Murphy was at the window, alert. The next morning, a reporter came by. Small-town news had gone regional, and now folks from the state capital wanted interviews. I didn't know what to say that hadn't already been said. "Just tell us what makes him special," she asked. "He listens," I said, "not just with his ears. He feels things most of us miss." Murphy wagged once and walked off the porch mid-interview. Toward the woods again. We followed. This time, he led us to an old trailer park on the far edge of town. Half of it had been torn up by the tornado and left to rot. FEMA never got this far. Murphy wove through the wreckage like he'd mapped it in his sleep. He stopped in front of a burned-out camper, sniffed, then barked. A faint meow answered. Inside, under a broken table, were 3 kittens, eyes barely open, ribs showing. The reporter's cameraman dropped his gear and helped me gather them. Murphy stood watch, tail swishing. We brought them to the shelter. They were weak, but alive. The shelter manager blinked when she saw Murphy. "You again?" she said. "You planning on running this place too?" He barked once. The reporter changed the story title that night. "Dog saves man, baby, boy, and now a litter of kittens." Murphy didn't care. That evening he sat on the porch again. Looking. Always looking. By the 5th morning of Murphy's porch patrol, I stopped pretending I wasn't curious. I brought my coffee outside, settled onto the top step, and watched him. Just like every day, he sat facing northeast, eyes trained on the woods as if someone had given him orders only he understood. He wasn't tense, wasn't relaxed either. He was tuned in. "You keep staring like that, Murphy. Folks are gonna think you've got second sight," I muttered. He didn't so much as glance at me. He only moved when a soft rustling came from the woods. Too light for a person. Too smooth for a deer. I stood up, heart kicking a little harder. Murphy trotted down the steps. "Here we go again." We crossed through the ditch behind the fence line, through what used to be a cattle pasture, and into the thinner part of the woods where the trees grew farther apart. I knew these trails from hunting seasons past, but Murphy veered away from anything familiar and forged ahead into the brush. We walked almost a mile before we saw it. A fire. Small, low, and carefully built, nestled in a dip in the ground like someone had meant to keep it hidden. Beside it sat a man wrapped in a blue poncho, face dirty and gaunt. He was stirring a can of something with a stick. He saw us and froze. "Not looking for trouble," I said, raising my hand slightly. "This here's Murphy. He brings me places." The man looked at the dog. Murphy didn't bark or growl. Just sat. "You a ranger?" the man asked, voice rough. "No, sir, just a neighbor. You okay?" He coughed once. "Been sleeping out here since the storm. Had a place over on Grove Street. Flattened." "You need help?" He nodded slowly. "I think I do." Murphy stepped closer and sat beside the man. Like always, I offered him some granola bars and water from my backpack. He ate like someone who hadn't trusted food in days. His name was Patrick. He didn't say much about himself, but enough to gather that he'd been alone a long time, even before the storm. "You the one they're talking about?" he asked. "The dog that finds people?" Murphy blinked at him. "Yeah," I said. "He's 4 for 4 so far." Patrick smiled with cracked lips. "Then maybe I'm lucky number 5. We brought him back slowly. I had to call ahead so the clinic could prep a bed. He was dehydrated and showing signs of infection, but the staff said he'd be okay with treatment and a bit of rest. That night, Murphy didn't sit on the porch. Instead, he curled up beside the back door and slept. Deep, dreamless sleep. It made me wonder, was there a rhythm to this? A pattern only he could follow? The next day, I got a call from someone at the shelter. The kittens were doing well, and one had already been adopted by a teacher from the local elementary school. "You're turning this dog into a legend," the volunteer joked. "We're getting calls from folks wanting to meet him, like he's a celebrity." Murphy just sniffed his food and laid in the shade. That afternoon, a car pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out with a clipboard and a soft voice. "Name's Todd. I'm with the county. Heard about the rescues. Thought maybe I could talk to you and the dog." He sat with me on the porch. Murphy rested between us. "I work with a volunteer K-9 group," Todd explained. "We train rescue dogs, missing persons, disaster response. I'd like to test him, if you'd allow it." I looked down at Murphy. He looked up at me, like he'd already heard everything. "Go ahead," I said. The next morning, Todd brought a kit, scent samples, hidden object tasks, even a mock search with another volunteer pretending to be lost. Murphy passed everything. With no training, no commands, just instinct. "I've never seen anything like this," Todd said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "He doesn't follow procedure. He just knows. This is beyond training. It's like he's built for this." Later that week, a letter came in, handwritten, from Dale, the man we found in the blind. "Still sore, but I'm alive. That dog gave me a second chance. Thank you both." I pinned it to the fridge, right next to Lily's drawing of Murphy with a cape. We were at the hardware store one afternoon when Murphy did something new. We were checking out, Murphy resting by my feet, when he stood up and walked toward a woman standing at the entryway. He sniffed her bag and nudged her leg gently. She looked confused. Then her eyes welled up. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photo. "This is him," she whispered. "He's my dad's dog. We lost him last year. Thought he'd died." I blinked. "Murphy?" She nodded. "We called him Milo. He disappeared during a thunderstorm. We searched everywhere." She showed me more photos. There was no mistaking it. Same folded ear, same white patch on the paw. "He was my dad's best friend. My dad passed away this year. If he found you, it's because he was meant to." Murphy leaned against her. "You can keep him," she said. "He chose you. He always chose people who needed him." That night, Murphy sat on the porch again. Same direction, same stillness. Because someone else out there needed him, and he'd go when the time was right. I didn't even hear the wind pick up until the screen door slammed shut behind me. Murphy had already moved off the porch. This time, he wasn't trotting. He was running. That alone told me everything. I didn't grab my coat. I didn't grab my flashlight. I just took off after him. The clouds above were churning, low and fast, and I felt that strange pressure in the air that warned you something wasn't right. Not quite a storm, not quite calm. Just in between. The kind of sky that turned dogs nervous and birds silent. We crossed the old train tracks and hit the gravel side road that curved behind what used to be the Benson farm. Murphy never looked back. He didn't bark, didn't hesitate. Just pressed forward like every second counted. About a quarter mile in, he cut into the brush. I followed without thinking. We ended up behind an abandoned school bus rusting near the edge of the tree line. It had been there for years, overtaken by ivy and moss. Murphy stopped at the front wheel well and sniffed. Then he let out a deep, low bark. Not loud, just enough. I crouched beside him. From inside the bus, I heard something, a soft, rhythmic thump. I pulled the door, but it was stuck. I braced my shoulder against it and pushed hard until it popped open with a groan. Dust flew. The smell hit me, stale, earthy, with a faint tang of something else. Gasoline? Murphy stayed close to my leg. We stepped into the bus. At first it looked empty, just cracked vinyl seats, broken glass, and torn ceiling panels. But as I moved toward the back, I heard the sound again. Thump, thump. Then a voice, weak, male. "Help me." In the last seat, barely visible under a threadbare blanket, was a man. Curled up, arms over his chest, eyes barely open. He didn't look homeless. He didn't look injured. He looked lost. In more ways than one. "Can you tell me your name?" I asked gently. He blinked slowly. "Mark." "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "Just tired? Didn't want to go home? Don't have one?" I handed him my water. He took a sip and closed his eyes like it was too much effort to hold them open. "I didn't want to be found," he said quietly. "But he did." He reached out and patted Murphy's head with a shaking hand. "Smart dog." I helped him out slowly. He was light. Too light. Malnourished. Maybe late 20s. We sat under the trees while I called in for help. Murphy stayed close, leaning against his side like a steady heartbeat. Mark was taken to the clinic. Turns out he'd been reported missing 2 towns over. Fell off the grid after losing his job and his apartment. No drugs, no crime, just heartbreak and drift. The nurse who checked him in said quietly, "He wouldn't have made it much longer." Murphy didn't react to the praise. He'd already moved to the edge of the lobby, facing the windows like he had somewhere else to be. That week, the local paper ran another story. They called it Murphy's Mission. A radio host from Tulsa called and wanted to feature him. A rescue organization asked if they could name their new training facility after him. I just smiled and kept feeding him chicken. The next few days were quiet. No sudden runs, no staring at the woods. Murphy rested more than usual, though I never once saw him nap all the way through. His ears were always twitching, always catching the world. Then came Sunday morning. I found him already pacing by the door, nose down, tense. "You ready again?" I asked. He barked once and turned toward the road. We ended up following the edge of the creek, where the water had risen again. Spring thaw was creeping in early this year, and the banks were soft and slippery. About halfway down the trail, Murphy stopped. His ears perked. His nose turned to the wind. He took off. We came upon a woman, mid-40s, clothes torn, shoes missing, sitting against a tree, arms around her knees, rocking slightly. I froze. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Murphy approached slowly, stopped a few feet away, then laid down. She looked up at him, then at me. "Did you bring him?" she asked. "Sort of. He brought me." She smiled a little. "I got turned around, tried to hike out after my car broke down. Then I fell, sprained something. I couldn't get back up the hill." Her name was Sarah. She was hiking the back trail near the old orchard when the path gave out beneath her. She'd been trying to wave down help all night. "No one could see me from the road," she said, "and I couldn't scream loud enough." But Murphy heard. I helped her walk back slowly, arms supporting her on one side, while Murphy stayed on the other. We passed a couple driving a four-wheeler who offered a ride. They'd been looking for her. She was reported missing that morning. Sarah cried when she got home, then hugged Murphy for 5 solid minutes. "That dog saved my life," she kept repeating. And still that night, Murphy sat on the porch, watching, waiting, because something in him knew. It still wasn't over. Murphy had been still for nearly 10 minutes. That alone was enough to make me put down the wrench I'd been using on the mailbox and follow his line of sight. He wasn't looking at the woods this time, not the creek either. He was looking east, straight across the open cornfields toward the old service road that ran behind the feed store. I wiped my hands on my jeans. "You seeing something I don't, boy?" He didn't answer, of course, just shifted his weight forward and gave a low, slow huff through his nose. Then he moved. Not fast, not urgent, but with a strange kind of quiet certainty, like he knew exactly where he needed to be. I grabbed my truck keys. He didn't wait. He took off down the gravel shoulder, head low, body relaxed, but focused. I trailed in the truck, windows down, letting him lead. We passed the edge of town, past Mr. Holloway's place where the mailbox still hadn't been put back up since the storm. The service road dipped around a ridge before it opened up into a cluster of trailers, sheds, and scattered equipment, what used to be an old tow yard before the owners packed up and moved west. Murphy veered off into the lot. I parked near a rusted-out backhoe and followed on foot. The place was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no wind, just the creak of a loose shutter somewhere in the distance. Murphy weaved between 2 collapsed sheds and disappeared behind a tarp-covered frame. "Murphy!" I called, stepping faster. I caught up just in time to see him pawing gently at a sheet of plywood leaning against a stack of tires. I crouched and listened. Breathing. Ragged. Human. I yanked the plywood back. Behind it was a boy, probably no older than 8. Dirty, shoeless, with wide eyes and tangled hair. He flinched, but didn't try to run. "Hey," I said softly. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you." He stared at Murphy. "He's nice," the boy whispered. "He found me." "What's your name?" "Cody." "You hurt, Cody?" He shook his head. "Just hungry." I gave him the granola bar I always kept in my back pocket. He tore into it like he hadn't eaten in days. "You here alone?" "My dad told me to wait. He said he'd come back, but it's been a long time." "How long?" He shrugged. "Since the big storm." Murphy lay beside him, pressing his side gently against the boy's arm. We got Cody out slowly. I wrapped him in my jacket and carried him to the truck. Murphy jumped into the bed and stayed there the whole ride. At the clinic, they checked him over. He had some bruises, old cuts, but nothing serious. Malnourished, yes. Traumatized, definitely. But alive. Cody's mother had passed away a year earlier. His father had been struggling. No fixed home, just jobs here and there. When the tornado hit, they'd been camped in the trailer yard. The father likely thought the site was safer than the town. No one knew where he went. The sheriff's office started a search that afternoon. Cody went into temporary foster care, but everyone hoped they'd find a relative. The town buzzed again. Another life, another rescue, same dog. Murphy slept hard that night, curled up tight in the corner of the living room, paws twitching every now and then like he was dreaming about the day. I watched him from the recliner, a quiet kind of awe in my chest. He didn't want anything in return. Didn't ask for praise. Just found people. And helped. Midweek, a teacher came by the house. Her son had drawn a picture of Murphy and wanted me to see it. She smiled when she handed it over. "He says Murphy is part angel, part superhero, part detective." I chuckled. Not wrong. We stuck it on the fridge next to all the others. It was getting crowded. By Thursday, the sheriff called with an update. Cody's dad had been found in a shelter 2 counties over, injured, confused, and asking about his son. He was brought back. The reunion was quiet, emotional. The man cried so hard he had to sit down. "You saved my boy," he told Murphy. "I couldn't, but you did." Murphy leaned forward and licked his knuckles. That weekend, a group of middle schoolers from town started a fundraiser. They wanted to build a dog park and name it after Murphy. One even pitched the idea of a statue. I tried to keep things simple at home. Still, it felt like the town was shifting around us, hope blooming in places that had been wrecked and muddy just weeks before. Murphy went back to his routine. Evenings on the porch. Eyes forward. He was waiting. And I didn't need to ask what for. I should have known something was brewing when Murphy refused breakfast. He wasn't sick. He wasn't tired. He just stood by the front door, staring at the horizon like he was waiting for the sky to give him a signal. His food bowl stayed full. He didn't touch the water either. That had never happened before. "All right, what is it this time?" I asked, crouching next to him. He didn't look at me, just kept that silent vigil. By now, I didn't need a bark or a growl to know it was time. I grabbed my coat and flashlight, though it was only mid-morning, and followed him out the door. He didn't lead me toward the woods this time. He headed west, toward the train depot. It was long abandoned, used mostly as a shortcut for local kids or an occasional hangout spot. Most of the town stayed clear of it since the tornado had scattered some of the nearby storage containers into the main yard. Murphy kept a steady pace, not rushing, not hesitating. I followed close behind as we weaved through tall grass and warped fences until the rusted frame of the depot came into view. He stopped just before the building and let out a single bark. Then a second. I jogged forward. The doors to the old freight warehouse had been pried open, the inside dark but not silent. I could hear movement. Shuffling. Maybe a voice. I hesitated, then pushed the door all the way in. The room was mostly empty now, just a few broken pallets and shattered windows letting in filtered light. And in the middle of the room was a woman. She was sitting on a mattress, arms wrapped around her stomach, rocking slowly. Her face was pale, and her lips were cracked. But she was breathing. Murphy walked straight to her and sat down. "Are you hurt?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. She nodded. "Not bad. I'm okay. Just needed somewhere to go." "Can I get you help?" She hesitated, then looked up. "I'm pregnant. 6 months. Lost everything in the storm. Been trying to stay ahead of it. But it caught up." She reached out and touched Murphy's head. Then he showed up. I helped her up, slowly and carefully. She was weak, dehydrated, but alert. We made our way back through the depot yard, Murphy keeping close to her side, never once letting his attention drift. At the clinic, they set her up with fluids and a warm bed. The doctor said she was lucky. One more night alone, and she could have gone into early labor. Or worse. Her name was Hannah. No family left. Her husband had died 2 years ago. The storm took her rental, her job, and nearly her life. She asked if Murphy could visit her again. I told her I'd bring him by whenever she liked. That evening, the wind picked up again. The sky changed colors fast, gold to gray, then to that deep slate blue that always meant rain. I brought in the porch cushions, but Murphy stayed out there, not lying down, not watching the woods, watching the sky. As lightning rolled in, he still didn't move. I stepped out and stood beside him. "You waiting for someone else?" I asked. He looked at me for a split second, then back to the sky. That night, the rain came in sideways, sheets of it pounding the windows and drenching the fields. Power flickered once, then went out. Murphy never flinched. When the storm passed, I opened the door and saw him already at the edge of the driveway. He looked at me once. Then he walked. We crossed 3 back roads, past the edge of the marsh, and finally reached an area I hadn't been to in years, the old Redding barn. It had collapsed in the storm and never been cleared. Most folks assumed it was too dangerous to explore. Murphy stepped carefully over the debris and stopped at a tilted section of what used to be the hayloft floor. He barked once. I crouched low. Underneath, barely visible, was a figure, a man, mud-covered, unconscious. I dug with my hands, peeling back broken wood and soggy insulation until I could reach him. He groaned. I shouted for help, called the fire department. By the time they arrived, Murphy had already backed away and was watching from a distance. They pulled the man free. He was a construction worker who'd been doing cleanup work on the Redding property and got trapped when the second line of storms came through. Nobody even knew he was there. They said if he hadn't been found that night, he wouldn't have made it to morning. Murphy followed the ambulance to the edge of the road, then turned around and walked back to me. I didn't say anything. I just patted his head and followed. Back home, I opened the front door. He paused for a second, just one, and looked behind him at the sky. Then he stepped inside. The next morning, Murphy slept in. I found him curled up in his usual spot by the door, one paw draped over his nose. He didn't move when I creaked the floorboard beside him. Didn't even twitch when the kettle whistled. After the storm, after the barn, it was the first time in weeks he looked completely at peace. Still, I kept watching him, waiting for the next sign, because I knew it would come. It always did. But that day passed without a bark, without a look toward the woods. Murphy snoozed in the sun, wandered the porch a bit, then went back to sleep. Evening rolled in without a call for help. For once, the house felt like just a house again. The next morning, I got a knock on the door. It was the postman, carrying a small cardboard box. "Something came for the dog," he said, amused. The label read, "To Murphy, care of his human, Mayfield." Inside was a letter and a leather collar with his name engraved in gold. The letter was from a little boy named Sam in Indiana. "I saw Murphy on TV," it read in crayon. "He is my hero. I saved up from my lemonade stand to buy him something special. Please tell him he is the best dog in the world." I held the collar in my hand for a long while. Murphy walked over and nudged it gently with his nose. I fastened it around his neck. He didn't resist, just looked up at me, then turned toward the door. Not to the porch, to the truck. "You want to drive?" I asked. He wagged his tail once. We drove without a destination. Past the river, through the farmlands that hadn't seen tornado damage, and up toward the ridge that overlooked town. Murphy kept his head out the window the whole time, wind rippling through his fur. When we got to the lookout, he jumped down and walked to the edge of the hill, gazing down at the rooftops and church spires below. I stood next to him. "Nice view, huh?" He didn't move, just sat down. And for a few minutes, we didn't do anything. We just existed. That night I was about to turn in when Murphy stood up again. One short bark, then he turned toward the north road. I sighed, but grabbed my jacket. He was already halfway down the path. We followed the old irrigation ditch until it met the edge of the neighboring county. Then he turned into a wooded trail that had once led to a campground. And there, beside a broken picnic bench, was a girl. Maybe 12. Shivering. Alone. Murphy walked straight up to her and laid down. She reached out and hugged his neck. "Where did you come from?" she whispered. I stepped closer. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No, just lost. We were hiking. I got turned around. Dad went to look for me but never came back. I called the sheriff. Within an hour, a rescue crew was combing the area. They found her father downstream, sprained ankle, calling out for her in the dark. They were reunited right there beside the picnic bench. The girl never let go of Murphy. Another story. Another save. Murphy didn't act proud. He didn't even bark. He just walked back toward the truck like the job was done. I started keeping a notebook, one line for every person he found. Lily, Dale, Eli, baby from the trailer, Rick, Sarah, Cody, Hannah, the construction worker. And now the girl, Jamie. 9. 9 people. Each name was a story. Each name was a life. The next day, a man from a local university showed up. Said he was researching canine behavior in natural disasters. Asked if he could study Murphy. I said no. Murphy wasn't a specimen. He wasn't some anomaly to dissect. He was just Murphy. And if he wanted to save someone, he would. With or without a study. That night, I asked him quietly, "You gonna stop at 10?" Murphy didn't look at me. He just stared out at the dark again, still waiting. Murphy had a routine by now. He'd wake up just before sunrise, stretch his front legs long and slow, then walk to the front door and sit, waiting for me to get the message. If I didn't open the door right away, he'd give one polite bark. Not loud, just enough. That morning, he didn't even need to bark. I was already watching him from the kitchen window, coffee in hand, knowing we were headed somewhere. We always were. I pulled on my boots. Murphy stood the second I grabbed the keys. We drove south, past the community garden that had started sprouting again thanks to an early spring, and a lot of helping hands. Murphy sat in the passenger seat this time, eyes steady on the road, tail thumping lightly every time I slowed near intersections like he was steering with me. He leaned toward the window when we passed Miller's Pond, then barked twice. I pulled off the road and parked. Murphy leapt out and took off around the side of the water, weaving through cattails and wet brush like he'd done it 100 times. I jogged after him, the hem of my jacket snagging brambles as we went deeper. We found the woman about 10 minutes later, sitting against a tree, holding her arm tightly against her chest. Her ankle was swollen, and her coat was covered in mud. Murphy reached her first. He didn't touch her, just stood there wagging his tail like he'd known exactly where to find her. She looked up at me and gave a tired smile. I knew someone would come. Her name was Denise. She'd gone for a walk to clear her head, took a wrong turn near the pond trail, and slipped in the mud, twisting her leg and hurting her arm trying to catch herself. I yelled for a long time, she said, as I wrapped a blanket around her. Then I stopped. I thought maybe I'd just wait until morning. Murphy didn't want you waiting that long, I told her. We called in rescue. She was lifted out gently and driven to the clinic. Her family met her there in tears. Another name for the notebook. 10. I told myself not to count, not to keep track like it meant something. But 10 felt like a number you pause at, a milestone. The next few days were quiet. Murphy didn't sit by the door. He didn't pace or watch the woods. He played. With a stick. With a tennis ball he unearthed from under the shed. He rolled in the grass and barked at squirrels. He was happy, and I wanted him to stay that way. I took him into town. People stopped us every few feet. Kids hugged him. Store clerks snuck him slices of cheese. One woman gave me a drawing her granddaughter had made of Murphy with angel wings. We dropped off canned goods at the church, talked with Pastor Joe about the rebuilding effort. Murphy sniffed every pew. At home that night, I made chicken and rice. Murphy got his own bowl, extra big. He licked it clean and curled up by the fire like he didn't have a care in the world. Then sometime around midnight, he stood up. I heard his paws click across the wood floor. He nudged the door once. Just once. I grabbed the flashlight and my boots. This time he led us northeast. Into the ridge country. It took over an hour to hike to the clearing. My breath came hard, but Murphy moved like the trail lit itself just for him. He stopped near an old stone well that had been capped years ago. There, in the brush beside it, was a teenage boy, curled up, asleep. Mud on his jacket, backpack torn at the strap. I knelt beside him and nudged his shoulder gently. He startled awake, eyes wide, breathing fast. Hey, it's okay. You're safe. He looked at Murphy, then me. You found me. I can't take credit for that. His name was Jeremy. He'd run away after an argument at home, slept rough for 2 nights, got lost in the hills trying to find a shortcut back to the highway. I didn't mean to disappear, he said quietly. I just didn't know what else to do. We walked him back to town slowly. His parents had already filed a missing persons report. When they saw him, they collapsed in the driveway with him in their arms. They hugged Murphy next. 11. Back home, Murphy went to the porch and laid down. He didn't look at the woods. He looked at me. I sat beside him. How do you always know? He rested his head on my knee. That night, I didn't sleep much. I watched him breathing. Calm. Steady. I didn't know where we'd go next. But I knew this. If there was someone out there who needed help, Murphy would find them, and I'd follow. It was just before dawn when Murphy stood up again. I'd been half awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad open in front of me. I wasn't writing, just staring at the list of names. 11 so far. 11 lives touched, pulled from the edge, redirected. Murphy padded over quietly, ears flicking toward the window. A soft breeze rolled in. The air was cooler than it had been, almost sharp. Something was shifting. When he let out that soft half huff from his chest, the one I'd come to recognize as his version of "It's time," I didn't hesitate. I stood, grabbed the flashlight and my coat, and followed him out. We took the gravel road past the Sinclair place, then veered left onto the trail that wound behind the big cottonwoods. Murphy didn't run. He didn't even trot. He walked, steady and quiet, like he was conserving energy for something that mattered. About 20 minutes in, he paused. His nose went up. He sniffed once, twice, then turned sharply toward the old quarry path. I followed him through a narrow cut in the trees until we reached the base of the quarry itself, a sunken pocket of broken rock and grass, fenced off decades ago but long since forgotten by most of town. He stopped near the slope and barked once. I scrambled down, boots skidding on loose stone. At first I didn't see anything. Then I heard it. Whimpering. Not a person this time. A dog. Small, high-pitched, desperate. Murphy darted to the side of the quarry wall where a rusted pipe jutted out beneath the brush. He nosed the debris aside, and that's when I saw it. A puppy. Thin, matted, with one leg twisted oddly beneath it. Its fur was soaked and clumped with leaves. "Oh, buddy," I said, kneeling. "What happened to you?" Murphy stood back, watching as I gently pulled the little guy out. He was cold, barely squirming, but alive. I wrapped him in my jacket and pressed him close. Back at the truck, I cranked the heat and placed the pup on the passenger seat. Murphy sat behind him, never taking his eyes off the tiny shape. We made it to the vet clinic by sunrise. They took him in immediately. The vet tech whispered he wouldn't have made it another hour. I glanced at Murphy. He already knew. We stayed while they cleaned and warmed the puppy. A broken leg, malnourishment, dehydration, but fixable, survivable. Afterward, we walked out into the parking lot. The morning sun was cutting through the clouds, golden and full. Murphy stood still for a long while, tail flicking slightly. "You count animals too?" I asked. He gave no answer, but I wrote the pup's name, Lucky, at the bottom of the list anyway. That afternoon, a boy named Kevin showed up at the clinic. He was 12 and had been volunteering on weekends. The vet introduced him to the puppy. Murphy watched them from the hallway. When the boy sat down and Lucky curled into his lap, Murphy turned and walked back toward the exit. He knew it was done. That evening, we took the long route home, past the fields and up to the overlook again. Murphy stood at the edge of the hill and watched the wind move through the tall grass. Then he sat, slow and deliberate. He didn't look tired. He looked thoughtful. I sat beside him. "You ever wonder what this all means?" I asked. He didn't move, just stayed there, still. Later that night, just before I turned in, I found him by the fireplace, not asleep, just watching the flames. 11 people, 1 puppy, 12 total. I thought of Sam's letter, the collar, the drawings, the people who cried when Murphy showed up, the ones who hugged him like he was a miracle made flesh. And still, he waited. As if the list wasn't done, as if there was always one more. The air smelled different that morning. Not of rain, not of smoke, not of anything ominous. Just clean, crisp, like the kind of morning that comes after something important ends or just before something new begins. Murphy didn't sit by the door this time. He stood by the window, staring out, his tail perfectly still. Not alert, not agitated, just waiting. I knew before he moved that we were going somewhere, but I also knew, somehow, it wouldn't be like the other times. When he finally turned and walked to the front door, he didn't look back. I grabbed my coat and followed. We drove in silence. No barking, no tail thumping against the seat. He just sat there, upright, staring out the window like he was reading signs only he could see. He directed me north this time, beyond the hills, past the county line. Places we hadn't gone before. We turned down a road I didn't recognize and past a cluster of houses I'd never noticed. Murphy gave one bark. Sharp, decisive. I pulled over. He jumped out and started walking. There was a house at the end of the gravel road, more shed than home, half covered in ivy, porch sagging slightly. No lights, no car. Murphy walked to the back. I followed, stepping carefully around broken flower pots and the remains of what had once been a bike. We found a man lying in a lean-to behind the shed. He was pale, his face gaunt and unshaven. One arm was wrapped with a dirty towel. His chest moved in shallow, irregular bursts. Murphy whined and stepped closer. I crouched. "Sir, can you hear me?" He opened one eye, blinked slowly. "Help," he rasped. Thought nobody would ever come. Murphy did. I called for an ambulance, stayed with him until they arrived. Hypothermia, infection, malnutrition. The paramedics said he might have had hours left, maybe less. At the hospital, he gave a name. Ben. No family nearby. He'd been squatting in the shed since before the tornado, injured during the cleanup and too ashamed to ask for help. Murphy sat outside the hospital entrance and waited until they wheeled him in. Then he stood up and walked back toward the truck. 13. We didn't go home right away. Murphy led me through the park, down to the creek, then along the far side of the baseball field. He paused at the war memorial and sat. We stayed there a while. Me sitting on the bench, Murphy beside me. I don't know how long we were there before I noticed someone watching us from across the street. A woman in her 60s, holding a box. She crossed over and stood a few feet away. "That your dog?" she asked. I think I belong to him, actually." She smiled. "I've seen him, on the news. My grandson said Murphy saved his classmate, the little girl after the tornado. That was Lily." She nodded and handed me the box. Inside was a framed certificate, a photo of Murphy with a group of rescue workers, and a bronze medallion. "They're honoring him at the town center this weekend. You should bring him." Murphy didn't react. He just stood watching the wind. That night, I made a list. 13 names. Each with a story. Each one a moment that had rippled outward, changing not just a single life, but everyone around them. Murphy slept by the fireplace again. Quiet. Dreaming. I leaned in and whispered, "You did good, boy." He opened one eye, licked my hand once, and closed it again. And still, deep down, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd follow him into the woods. Because miracles don't clock out. Murphy was awake before the sun. I could hear him shifting by the door, his claws tapping softly on the wood floor as he moved between the window and the rug. When I stepped into the room, he was already staring at me, not expectant, not anxious, just present, waiting. Outside, the sky was a pale gray, streaked with faint light. The breeze was warmer than it had been. Spring was finally settling in for good. "You ready?" I asked. Murphy blinked slowly, then turned and sat, still watching. It had been a week since Ben. A week since Murphy led me to the man curled behind the shed with an infected arm and a broken sense of hope. A week of quiet. But this morning was different. He didn't bark. He didn't nudge the door. He waited for me to open it. So I did. We took the truck north. Murphy watched the road like he knew exactly where we were headed. When we reached the edge of the next county line, he barked once. I turned onto a road I'd never taken before. We passed a series of open fields and barns in mid-repair, blue tarps flapping over roofs still healing from the storm. He barked again, then stood. The road led us to a small church I'd never noticed before. Whitewashed wood, chipped siding, a rusted bell in the tower. The kind of place that looked abandoned until you saw the single red door, freshly painted. Murphy hopped down and walked toward the cemetery behind it. I followed, boots crunching the gravel path. He stopped in front of a woman kneeling by a grave. She was bundled in a quilted jacket, her gray blonde hair pulled into a messy bun. In front of her was a weathered headstone. She had both hands on the stone, head bowed. Murphy sat a few feet away. I waited, unsure whether to speak. Then she looked up. Eyes wet, red-rimmed, but calm. "I heard about him," she said softly. "You know him?" "No, but my brother was on the crew that pulled the man from the barn. He said the dog just appeared and sat beside the wreckage until help came. Said he wouldn't move until they found someone." I nodded. "He's done that more than once." She smiled faintly. "People think miracles have to be loud, big, bright lights, thunder, but sometimes they're quiet. They walk on four legs. They just show up." She looked down at the stone again. "My husband's name was Will. He passed 2 years ago. I come here every Sunday. Talk to him. I always ask if I'm doing okay." She reached out and gently touched Murphy's head. "Today, I asked for a sign. Then your dog came and sat down." Murphy stayed there for nearly 5 minutes, then rose and walked back to me. We didn't speak on the ride home. That afternoon, the town center held a small ceremony. They gave Murphy a plaque, a ribbon, and a custom-made dog tag with the words, "For every life you touched." Kids clapped, adults wiped their eyes. Murphy took it all in quietly, standing tall but never puffed up. He let them pet him, let them thank him, then walked back to my side when it was over. I noticed someone had hung a banner across the building's front. "Welcome home, Murphy, the dog who never stopped caring." That night, I lit a fire early and set out an extra blanket for him near the hearth. He didn't go to it right away. He stood by the door again, looking out into the dark. I opened it and stood beside him. No wind, no sound, just the stars and the gentle creak of the porch wood beneath our feet. "Is it time?" I asked. Murphy turned to me, then stepped off the porch and laid down on the grass, facing the trees. He didn't look tired. He looked finished. Not empty, just full. I sat beside him, not saying a word. We stayed like that for a long time, the cool air wrapping around us, the sky slowly shifting from black to deep navy to dawn blue. And when the sun finally rose, Murphy was still there. Watching. Always watching. Even if he never moved again, I knew this much. The world was better because he had. The list in my notepad remained open on the table. 13 people. 1 puppy. 1 town made whole again. Because 1 dog decided to care. The days that followed were quieter, but not empty. Murphy still got up with the sun, though now he spent more time resting by the garden or watching from the porch rather than walking the trails. Neighbors started leaving things for him. A hand-knitted scarf showed up on the porch railing one morning. A basket of biscuits from the bakery the next. One little boy dropped off a homemade card that just said, "Thank you, Murphy. I sleep better because of you." Murphy took none of it with pride. He accepted it all the same way he accepted everything, with quiet grace. We started going to the school on Tuesdays. The teachers invited us after they heard how many students had written about him for their essays. Murphy would sit at the front of the classroom while kids read aloud, often breaking into giggles when he yawned dramatically or leaned into their legs for attention. A little boy named Tyler, who had barely spoken in class for months, told the story of how Murphy had found his cousin. After he finished, he walked right up and hugged Murphy without saying a word. Murphy wagged his tail once and licked the boy's ear. It was enough. On weekends, we visited the vet clinic. Lucky was growing fast, chasing toys and toppling chairs. Kevin, the boy who had adopted him, introduced Murphy as the reason Lucky gets to sleep in my bed now. One evening, I was walking Murphy through the square when a woman stopped us with tears in her eyes. "I used to be scared of dogs," she admitted. "But he's different. He's not just a dog. He's peace in a world that forgets how to be kind." And maybe that's what it was. Murphy wasn't just a rescuer. He was a reminder. That love didn't need words. That presence could be powerful. That showing up, again and again, was a kind of miracle in itself. The final entry in my notebook wasn't a name. It was a sentence. Because of Murphy, people started believing again. And that's something no storm could ever take away.